just do it.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's a brand new day.
Science!
Now prepare to experience the most outrageous man on radio.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
The station for more fun in the sun. Good morning.
This is insane.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And here we are again. The station with more fun in the sun. And before we get to our main topic of the day, let's take a look.
The Weather Watch forecast.
And the reason it's the station with more fun in the sun, though it's looking less likely. The weather forecast has gone downhill over the past 35 years, 40 years, who knows. It's currently 63 degrees outside my studio here in the mid-Atlantic states. The Appalachian Mountains run through this area, these parts. More of an eastern side, east of the Ohio Valley, but not hardly near the shoreline. There's a 30% chance of thunderstorms today. Wasn't supposed to be that way, but you know. But there's a sun peeking through the clouds. Yes, I am tired. It is 3:37 a.m. 79 degrees for the high, 52 for the low. But tomorrow is where it starts to just get weird. In fact, Tuesday is going to be a high of 54 and a low of 34. Wednesday, 39 for the high, 27 for the low. I'm painting today either way because it's going to be 50 overnight and 50 tomorrow, so that'd be enough. Thursday, 48 for the high, 28 for the low, and then Friday is going to be a carbon copy of today, 54 for the high and 34 for the low. So we're after today, we're approaching basically, a blast back into early March weather. Actually, yeah, late February, early March weather. The station with more fun in the sun, man.
The Weather Watch forecast.
Anyway, that was all that. So, yeah, here we are. And, I always like to listen to this thing.
Hey, you're Forbes and Harrington, ain't you? Ain't you the guys that was up in space?
Yeah, but we can still buy a couple of beers for 30 cents Earth money.
Hey, you bet your life, but your money's no good here. The drinks are in the house. I don't get to serve many celebrities. Now drink up, boys.
Oh, thanks.
I don't even care that you cracked up the ship. And I'm a taxpayer.
Say, what's it like up there in outer space?
Well, it's like way out.
It's like way out. Yeah. Well, we're way out in space on this spaceship Earth. This photo, this UFO exclusive, which actually I've been holding on for a long time, for a while. Not a long, long time, but I mean within this year, a year, I guess, was taken by someone I've known my whole life outside of it, out the window of an airplane. The pilot acknowledged this, and everybody on that side of the airplane saw it, and they were all snapping photos too. They had no explanation for what these things were. They followed the plane. I have about 6 different photos, of them, and then they just zipped off. Isn't that weird? I'm serious. I'm not messing with you. It's not one of these,
Attention, people of Earth, I have an important announcement to make.
It's not that. I mean, it's just weird. Right? And of course, you've seen the Navy photos and, well, you've seen them all. But, this is about the closest up. And I had to shrink this down for purposes of the title card. But I mean, yeah, what the heck, man? I mean, these things were moving. It wasn't like there's some kind of plasma things or something. They were moving like in formation, and then they were following the plane for a while, and then they just kind of like, what are those things, right? It's like, UFOs, UAPs, I think they call them unidentified aerial phenomenon. Is that what they're calling them? I think that's what it was. I just wrote that off the top of my head. Are real, but what are they really? And too bad we'll probably never know. The seat. I mean, there's no way this chair could have shrunk. I mean, it's so taped up. But I guess I'll have to deal with that. And something's going on with my camera too, but you can't see that. So here we are. It's the 25th of April in the calendar year 2022 in the former United States. I'm your host. In case you don't know that, I'm here every day.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And we bring you all kinds of stuff. And, I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day. When you look at some 600 plus morning shows that are anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, mostly 2 hours. So they're like feature length shows on top of the thousands of programs I've done over the years. The 10 books and the 50 songs, might as well throw that in. And the other essays and stuff. And all the crazy jobs and travels. It's quite an adventure, and it's amazing how I'm able to come to you in black and white. No. It's amazing how I'm able to constantly still come up with things. It's just, but, when I think about it, because of my travels and everything, it's just that I have such a depth of information and just photography and, it's insane. I haven't even cracked the surface. I haven't even, put it this way, I haven't even opened my archives. I got like 10 or 20 years worth of archives that haven't even been opened. I have videos, digital video tapes from remote regions of this planet that I haven't even bothered to, digitize to the computer. They're, boxes, unopened, documents. And it's like kind of, I put in the chat, about the UFO thing. What are they? What are they really? And it's like, we'll never know. And there's so much stuff we'll never know because, I think there's a lot of people like me out there that are sitting on information. And there certainly, I can't be the only person that YouTube has singled out. Right? You'd have to be really, paranoid. But people tell me this all the time about how bizarre it is, the counts, the view counts I have. But is it possible I am the only person that YouTube has singled out where I get 3 views? Like right now I have no views, and I may go through the entire show with no views. It's hard to say. I mean, it is 3:44 a.m. However, that said, we live in a world where half the world's awake and the other half is, will be waking up shortly, next several hours. But I mean, there's 2 billion active users on YouTube. How do I get 3 views? Yeah, I mean, every now and then there's a dozen or whatever. Or sometimes if it starts shooting up past 33, that magic, Illuminati Masonic number 33, Once it gets up to 33, somehow they quick knock it down to 12 or something. Right? It's weird. So I don't know, but the thing about it is, and I've always said this, and this is, like I say, this is like the branded show, look at the morning show mug. All of these sayings, that what then hoodie and all these shirts and books and what have you, they're there and they're available for you, So it's like, I'm real, right? Let me just see here. My CDs, right? I'm real. Oh, this one too. This is the one I held 2 of the same up. Then anyway, we have this old classic here, right? My books are real, right? Published, barcoded. But I get 3 views. This isn't clickbait. That's a UFO exclusive. Those are UFOs that, like I said, the photos were personally sent to me by somebody I've known my entire life. Figure that out. And, yeah, I just never got around to putting them up. It's weird, right?
Okay.
That made no sense. But I'm not going to harp on that because I bring that up every now and then just because of the absurdity of the whole thing. But I think it kind of ties into the UFO thing. Because in many ways, and I had one of my early books, like I said, I wrote 10 books. And in one of my early books, I do recount a UFO possible abduction experience that I had. Well, it wasn't so much a UFO, it was an extraterrestrial, an ET experience I had as a child. And I tell that story. It's just a one-pager, thing. It's something that stuck with me my whole life. It was, I probably should have went under hypnosis and got the full story. But at least that part, and I just relay that in, I forget which book it was, the first or second. But, so, I'm familiar with this. I've always been a sci-fi type of person. And by the way, what I saw and when that happened to me was as a child, and that was way before any of the, books about UFOs and the images from that book, what was it, Communion or something like that, came out, so that they said people were seeing something because this book was publicized. I was like, well, no, this is way before that. I was a kid. So, you have that. So I have a direct experience with this. It's like I say, I always try to bring you things firsthand. So here's a firsthand photo that I know is real. Okay. And I've had a firsthand ET encounter, which, may just drive some people just say, this guy's nuts now. Now we know he is nuts. We suspected it for a very long time, but now we're convinced of it. The guy's a loon, right? He's a loony.
After he's stalked, we must get rid of him immediately.
Yeah. I wouldn't worry so much about that. I'd worry more about this.
Your papers, please.
Lots going to change, man, this fall. I think they're going to bring that thing back, It's my prediction. Legendary white handkerchief. I had a busy day yesterday out in the backyard. And today I intend to have a busy day. I did some painting of a fence, which I hated. I really did this funky paint job on this fence I put up. But the way it is, there's like too many fences in the back, and I needed to just make them all one color. And I think I have just enough paint ready to finish off. I couldn't finish the one thing because I'm painting this thing that's plastic. To raise the fence so I don't have to deal with the next door neighbor. Privacy, basically. Next door neighbors. I like to lay out in the sun and get a suntan, And, it was the same reason why this woman had this problem with this tree. I think it was blocking her view from her second floor window, so she could like look down at me suntanning in my backyard or something. I know it's weird. But it's like, what other rational explanation other than just being a general busybody? But I'm hoping that I didn't kill the tree because I had to trim it way back because she was using the excuse it was like over her fence. So I trimmed it to like this weird thing where it like comes off. This is like here, my hand is the trunk, and the tree comes like over weird bend, almost would look really spooky in twilight around Halloween. But I'm hoping this fills up with leaves because it's the way I've structured it. It'll block her second floor window off. And this plastic thing that I'm painting brown to match the brown fence that was there. And then the other part, the funky fence that I had, my artistic fence. I painted that brown. I hated to. It was like, but at this point in life, you don't get attached to anything. Life is what it is. The past two shows I had were kind of, led into that. My cat today, was strong enough to come downstairs, but I gave it some duck. A friend of mine bought some duck food, but it's like some kind of stuff that's made for cats that have digestive things. It took a couple licks and then forgot it. So I took it upstairs, sprinkled some, I don't know, this stuff the vet gave. It's like another microbiome digestive thing, but I think there's some beef flavored to it. And then I had another can in the refrigerator from just a day ago or so. And so I mixed that up and put that out there too. So it's like kind of, he's got dry food and he's got a choice of two different wet foods, and a fresh bowl of water. So it's like kind of like a buffet. So hopefully he'll eat it. If he doesn't, I might have to give him, I'm supposed to be on this every other day steroid thing. But yesterday I only gave him a tiniest little bit and he was very normal yesterday. He was his old self. So if he's up there and he's lethargic and he doesn't eat that stuff, he hasn't used the litter box yet. I hope he uses it. I might just give him a tiny little bit of a squirt of that stuff that he can't spit out, and maybe that'll give him another day. This is going to sound a little bit weird and maybe not, and maybe, a psychiatrist might take this the wrong way, but especially if they watch my last two shows, which were kind of depressing. But yesterday the weather was nice. It got up to 81 degrees. Like I say, this week after today's going to be nice, but after today it's going to be a week of, blast from your past back to March. But that said, yesterday and today will be nice, and I already have the bedroom window open because it's, like I said, it's 60. What did I say it was? 60-some degrees? Let's see. Yeah, it's like 63 degrees. So that's good enough in a house, that's holding heat to begin with. So that, the room temperature is room temperature. And it's fresh air and relatively dry air. But I was laying in bed towards the end of the day, just watching some different things on YouTube as I normally do. Maybe after a Perry Mason, playing some solitaire, and then get bored with that. You could play solitaire on Fire TV, and whoever designed the app it's like ergonomically easy to use, like with the remote and stuff. It's amazing what, the stuff people come up with. There's some people that, some programmers, they really do some interesting things. But I mean, it's solitaire, for crying out loud. And then if every time you win, there's a commercial. See, that's the reward. I mean, they got it together. You know what I mean? I mean, I understand what their rationale is. If you lose, there's no commercial. See, the idea is the commercial's the reward. You feel like, good. You get this dopamine hit, supposedly. And now the commercial, and you might be interested in buying some kind of stupid, idiotic thing. But, they're also cool enough that you could hit the X and basically, you only have to watch a second or two of the commercial. And I don't have a Roku box, but I have Fire, like I said, I have Fire TV, Fire Stick, whatever, the dongle thing, right? But you can get the Roku channel on there. And I watched a Rockford Files yesterday. Now, I think that was coming from Roku. But there was something that said add to my library. But I didn't see in my mail today that I watched Rockford on Amazon Prime. Oh, no, on Roku. But after that, I did a search for the show Moonlighting. And I added it to my library, which I didn't even know I had a library. And I don't know what this is from or how. And I watched the first episode of Moonlighting. Right? That show with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd? Yeah. So I'm curious to see. And I didn't see anything in my mail when I checked my mail today, like where I purchased some, $99, package of Moonlighting. So I have no idea where or how that came, but I watched it and the quality was fairly good. The Rockford File quality, Roku, was really good. And that's free too. They have commercials. There were only 3 commercials in the show, but only 2 commercial breaks. One commercial break had 2 short spots. And they weren't that bad. They were totally targeted to me, which I understand. That's why Roku's beating the pants off of the other ones, its competitors. It was something about a cat food, right? So somehow it, how it figured that out. And the other was whatever the other spot was. I don't remember what it was, but it was very quick and inobtrusive. It didn't bother me, and I was quickly right back in the show. It was only a 1 commercial break, and it wasn't even 15. It was 15 seconds or something like that. I'm fairly a non-consumer at this point in my life. I buy things out of necessity, but like anyone, I will, if I see something interesting, I'll go like, that's interesting. And if it is affordable or, whatever, I may be interested in getting it. Anyway, that's that. But while I was laying there, the reason I'm saying this is it's about the cat. People are interested in this stuff, and
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
It's the vlog, and we always start this way before we get into things. But he was in the window because the window was open, and I have built this thing so it's easy for him to jump up because the window's fairly high. All right. And so he was looking out the window like he did last summer when he was very healthy and he This is one of his favorite spots. He has about 6 favorite spots, but the cat's like, especially with the window open, so he could breathe in, all the scents of everything, right? And I thought, well, he may not. I hope he, like I say, I hope he does well. I hope he gets over this. But if he doesn't, my thought was, I had a sense of, kind of a little sense of calm and peacefulness about it when I watched him. He was enjoying himself. And the idea is, I guess at this point, is what I'm trying to say. And I guess even with people themselves, and which annoys me about the way we have this system of what we do with the elderly. But that he was, my main goal now is for him to experience life to the fullest and all of his favorite things. You see what I mean? So he can, in fact, I wish the weather wasn't getting so cold this week, but I have the window open now, so I'll put him up there. But, he's not doing that well, so he couldn't really come down, but he looked over at me, and I went over and I grabbed him and I placed him on the bed so he didn't have to because he knew that if he tried to, he might slip and fall, It's a pretty, So, and that's what I say. And it annoys me the way we do with our, so that's the cat story for today. And we'll see what happens with that. But, just to end this with, because I brought up the elderly. It's like the same thing with the elderly. Instead of allowing people who've lived full lives and who have their favorite things, particularly nursing homes, where they just kind of put people in a bed, and they have stupid thing like today's bingo day, and they talk to them like they're little kids or something. It's like they're wise people. They've lived 80, 90 years, and you're talking to them like they're babies. Come on now, Mrs. Smith. Well, I don't talk to that person like that. That person, for all she was an astrophysicist, You know what I mean? And a lot of these people, in these places, they were like, they held good jobs. They went south and they're in these care facilities or long-term care facilities or what do they call them? Managed care, that kind of stuff. A lot of these people were executives and whatnot. And I know that firsthand because I have my mother's not in a nursing home, but she has her own apartment but it's like kind of a semi-managed care or whatever you call it. They have a shared dining room or something like that. But, she tells me the stories because she's 80, she's almost 89, she's approaching 89. And when I talk to her on the phone, she sounds the same as when I called her from California when she was 40. I'm serious. Same conversations. But she tells me these kinds of things. So again, like this show, that's another thing about this show. It's always been firsthand, including camera 2 up there, which is the live view of the coal trucks, which we're probably a little too early for that. But just to add that touch of first-handness. And there aren't an awful lot of shows. I mean, there are DIY shows on YouTube that are obviously firsthand because they're doing a thing. But, the people who really get the hits and all that stuff are the people that are just copying something from like a mainstream news outlet. And they're like pulling it up on the screen. Or like I said, they're plagiarists. They like rewrite it and they say it's like from their website. But all they've really done is taken a story from somebody else's website and, and reordered the paragraphs and came up with changed the headline. And they claim it's theirs. It's like, oh, you broke that story? See, this is a UFO exclusive, all right? This is my photo. No one else has this except the person that gave me this photo, who took the shot. I have 6 different, these UFOs in 6 different positions. So this is a UFO exclusive. It's firsthand. And you're seeing it for the first time on Tony Caravan Live. And the stories I tell you are firsthand stories. And you're looking at a live view outside my window, outside the studio. But anyway, be that as it may, yeah, I don't think we treat the elderly properly. And I don't think veterinarians treat ill animals the way they should. In emergency cases, yes. Okay? But that's the same with modern medicine. You know, the people in the, emergency rooms and that sort of thing, the EMTs and people like that, they really, they save lives because in the critical moment, early moments of some accident or some situation that they're called into, that's when you stabilize a person. But when you look at big pharma, and of course big ag, like I say every show, and I don't mind repeating it, 40,000 people a week die of preventable illnesses. I wouldn't even call them illnesses, just preventable things that are primarily caused by processed foods. And the U.S. lifestyle, big ag and big pharma. But mostly just big ag, mostly the food we're eating. I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, I could write, which should be a New York Times bestseller book, The Ultimate Diet, how to lose how to lose anywhere from 10 to 130 pounds, right? Within anywhere, depending on how many pounds you want to lose, within 2 weeks to, a year, right? 2 years. I said, the only problem is the book would have a cover and there'd only be one page inside with really big, bold type, right? And it would say, drastically reduce the amount of carbs and sugars you consume. That's all it would say. The ultimate diet, the Tony Caravan diet. I've taken off a ridiculous amount. And in the past couple of weeks, I've taken off like 10 pounds just because I realized some of the health foods that I thought I was eating, I started to look and realized that the carbs and sugar numbers were ridiculous. And so I just got out of that. I'm eating fresh, vegetables, fresh foods, and I'm avoiding carbs and sugars. And the weight just comes off you like, you could lose a pound a day. I mean, if you have the other thing, the bottom and be active. And I don't mean go out jogging. I don't mean forget about this 10,000 steps or 5,000 steps or whatever amount of steps. No, just you could walk around the block, or you could just do like I do, work out in the yard. And when I say workout, I don't mean a workout. I mean just, painting the fence, fixing this, moving stuff around. I spent about 2.5 hours out in my backyard yesterday. About a half hour of it, or 20 minutes of it, I was sitting in the chair soaking up some vitamin D, right? Because right around noon, because I went out about 10-ish, 9:30-ish, 10-ish, was getting into the nitty-gritty stuff that I wanted to get out of the way, all the little things, some cleanup and stuff like that. And then as the day wore on, I realized it was getting hot, so it's like I just sat down in my chair, and it was right around high noon, and the sun was hot. And, the show's in black and white. But, I got, a little bit of color on my face, head. I was wearing a tank top type of thing and shorts. And it just felt good. And it was like, the sun. And, that's pure vitamin D. And, of course, it activates all kinds of things inside you, boosts your immune system, and does all kinds of great things for you. But that's all you really need to do. So the quality of life is that easy. Okay, so that's enough of that. And for the last time.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
All right. So UFOs, the reason you tuned into this show, first half hour. UFOs, UAPs are real, but what are they? Okay. Too bad we'll never know. Well, we probably will never know, really, because it's just the nature of where we're going as a civilization, right? And what's happening with the planet and the solar system. And, you know, this gets into very complicated things. And there's a lot. I'm going to throw out a couple of weird stuff. You know, there's this one. First of all, we're heading into, the people talk about the galactic center and certain alignments of things. And I'm not talking about astrology per se, but how astrology actually came about and why it's such an ancient thing. Like, that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. And even critics of it, they don't really get into. That, like, these people were dealing with this. There had to be a reason why something has survived thousands and thousands of years where other things have come and gone, right? And that these things actually, we know about these things. And some people say, well, people had nothing better to do but look up in the sky. Well, maybe that's part of it, but it just so happens that there's, you know, they happen to look up in the sky and they notice Earth changes and things that coincided with certain positions of the planet, the solar system, in conjunction with where we were in the galaxy and alignment of planets and things like that. And we know that the magnetic field of both the sun and the Earth, that these things are crucial to our climate and the Earth changes that we're experiencing. So in other words, right now, in fact, a friend sent me something this morning. Of course, it says be nice up there, but I'm just going to leave it there. Something this morning about, all these, we're having like an uptick in solar flares, and the sun's a little more active than it was expected to be at this particular time. Quite frankly, I could take the be nice down to here, and that won't cause a problem. And then that solves that problem. But the sun is the major contributor to our climate. And, just for the sake of like I say, someone who came in here for this UFO type of thing. The Earth's atmosphere is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 0.9% argon. And so that's 99.9% of the Earth's atmosphere. And that would probably come as a shock to the average person. And certainly to school children who've been like fed this CO2 thing and greenhouse gas type of stuff. CO2 is only 0.004% of the atmosphere. It's a trace gas along with water vapor. They call those things greenhouse gases because they pump them into greenhouses to help the plants grow. Every vegan and vegetarian out there should be like, hoping that we double the CO2. And I know there's certain science people that disagree vehemently with that. But so be it. You're wrong. I'm right. All right? 99.9%, all right, is not contested even in the scientific community. So this is a nitrogen planet, okay? And CO2 is a trace gas. And our magnetic field is way more responsible for things that are happening climatology-wise on this planet than any trace gas, all right? And we're talking about, and the sun has its effects on not only our planet, but other planets in the solar system, which we're people who are observing this now are experiencing right now. We're viewing that through, and we have some great telescopes now. And we're watching this stuff happen on the planets, the gas giants particularly. Pluto also, Uranus, whatever. And anyway, so that affects things like jet streams, right? And the how many, the volume of cosmic rays that can get through the Earth's atmosphere, right? And in the sun's instance of its magnetic field is an overall protection of its solar system, our star, we subsequently call Sol now. So it's like the solar system. And so with a weakening magnetic field on the Earth, more cosmic rays and even solar rays are getting in. And we're seeing anomalies in the South Atlantic. And as I often have said, we've seen these, the magnetic South Pole migrate off of the continent of Antarctica. And we've seen the magnetic North Pole migrate out of the, Arctic Ocean towards Siberia. So we may have a pole shift, as they call it, or maybe not. But either way, it's a phenomenon. It's observable. And the weakening magnetic field, which has sped up in recent decades, in the past century, is observable and has been observed by people who study this stuff, scientists. Okay. You can't argue with these. These are inarguable points. But what does that have to do with UFOs? Well, I was watching a guy who was, he was presenting what he called a hypothesis. And I'm paraphrasing here, okay? That's why I'm not even going to mention the guy's name, because I don't want to, get it wrong and, to the point. But what I'm about to say and what I gleaned from his presentation was interesting. He was looking, and I've talked about this as well, is the macro micro, universe. So, and in physics, modern physics, you take Einstein's physics as opposed to, contemporary physicists. And there's disagreement or questions about things that they don't match up. Certain things don't match up. They don't make sense. There's no theory of everything, put it that way. But anyway, and so you're dealing with dark matter, black holes, dark energy. People have all these ideas to fill in the gaps of the things that they can't explain, the unexplainable. Unlike in other episodes where I talked about the unknowable. There are things that are just simply unknowable because whether our brains are capped, or whatever. But UFOs are unexplainable right now, okay, generally speaking. So what this one guy was saying or presenting or was presented, it was part of his presentation. So like I said, I don't know if this was the point he was trying to make, but I'm going to make it. That when you look through a telescope, everyone has seen that image, and I could pull it up and get it, but I think it. Let's just do it since the show is about this. I don't know what it would be under. Let's see. Computer rendering of the universe. Let's see if we can find that. That's the one I'm particularly looking for is the let's see. Something from science.org. Well, anyway, you've seen this. This isn't the exact picture that this is the one I was looking for. Okay. And there's various versions of this. And where you look at it and it almost, the universe itself looks like the brightest spots in here are actually collections of galaxies. That's how like ridiculously insane this is. And there actually are there was some actual 10-year, it might have been a 10 to 20-year project where they did with actual telescopes take portions of the sky to create something, where that would allow the computer to, it was something like, like this may be it, but that this is a computer filling in the gaps. But it looks like a neural network, right? But the insanity of it is how macro this is, right? I mean, we're talking about, bigger than big, ginormous doesn't isn't the word for it. Okay. So we know that, and many of you are familiar with that. Okay. That's just the way it is. But when you go down to the microscopic, and I saw that like the Planck Institute there was mentioned, but when you get down to Planck, like these really things that are this kind of stuff that they restarted recently, the Hadron Collider too, which is kind of like there's a new weirdness going on. There's like this group of people that are putting out these things. They mention the Hadron Collider in it, but they're talking about some kind of events. And I don't know if you've caught that. It's just starting to work its way through, the kind of like I don't know what you want to call it, the conspiracy web sites, maybe not. And I don't mean like conspiracy as in political, but I mean people into the very, very, very strange, stuff. But anyway, that is a fact. They did restart the Hadron Collider, and it's able to do more things and see more. But when you look down, forget about that. I just mentioned that in passing just to give you an update, since we're into this kind of, thing.
Science.
So the microscopic, when you're talking about the space between, when you get down to it below atomic particles, all right, like neutrons and, neutrinos and stuff. But I mean, the fact that there's all this vast space between them, and everyone knows, I mean, even when I was in school, when you first learned about the atom, you couldn't help but look at it and think of it in terms of planets, right? And a moon around a planet, or a sun, and planets revolving around, an atom, that kind of structure thing, except when they, molecular structures that kind of glob together and that sort of thing. But I think, what I was saying, what this guy kind of more or less got me to thinking, like I said, I don't know if it's his hypothesis necessarily, but just what I took away from it, was that he was also getting into the cellular structure of the complexity of the DNA within the human body. And again, this super micro, and talking about the trillions and trillions of cells in our body, right? And of course, even people like Dr. Beth, who's also, if you know who she is, I've talked about her in the past. She has a book out. I just loaned it out to a friend of mine. called Your Pristine Blueprint, I think it's called. Check her out. She's kind of interesting. She's an actual medical doctor's practice for like 20 years, but she's into, she sees, having, treated patients for 20 plus years, she's found that there's more to it than just prescribing a drug or a certain thing. And she sees it in she sees medicine in a little bit more broader than the average, physician who's involved in what we call McMedicine, just bring everybody in 10 or 15 minutes and then send them away with the prescription. But she's often talked about the trillions of cells and the mitochondria, these engines that are inside there that operate the cell. And that's where this whole idea, where I talk about how sophisticated and almost android-like the human body is, right? And that we have these bioelectric brains that are potentially supercomputers, but just seem to be not being utilized. And that could well be because of, in order for us to function in the current civilization that we've established in this interglacial period, or at least over the past 10 to 12,000 years. So in other words, we see what we need to see in order to navigate through the societies that we've set up and established. Because if we saw more or thought differently, those things would get in the way. And we would, so the body itself has, may well have just adjusted on its own. The brain is trying to, we see what we need to see, just like an eagle, right? It explains this idea, and I know I'm getting on slightly tangential here, but the idea is that the nose of a rodent, speaking of which, I've spent time trying to deal with that thing, and I'm going to deal with it again today, is much smaller than noses, especially, my snaz, right? Excuse me. Good excuse to do that. It was itchy. And yet it's far more sensitive than ours. But if we were able to sense things a mile away, like a bee or an insect, they have these ridiculous sensitivity to certain things. So, they could be drawn to something. Well, if we were constantly diverted by being able to smell something that was like, a couple blocks away, you see, we would have trouble. Our society wouldn't function. Likewise, when you look up in the sky and you see like a hawk or something, maybe out west, if you see eagles or something, there's some eagles around these parts too. But I've often seen hawks, and they have the ability, to look down, and they can see, speaking of rodents, from such a distance, their eyes, they have such incredible eyes, which are smaller than ours, right? Yet they can make out from high up in the air, see these things on the ground. Well, imagine if our vision was that, if we had eagle eyes, right? How it would get in the way of our functioning, right? We'd be like, what, we would be fascinated. What would we do? We'd be staring off and looking into the mountains and seeing these different things. Do you see what I'm saying? Or like, bat hearing, or even a cat's or a dog's ears, the hearing. So you take a tiny dog, because someone might say, well, they have the big conical shape ear. Yeah, but what about some of these little, these people have these tiny little dogs they put in their purse, and they don't even have the real big conical shaped ear. But their ears are so sensitive, way more sensitive than ours, but they're smaller. So things with smaller noses, smaller eyes, smaller ears, right, have all of these abilities that are far, far beyond ours, yet they have brains that are, are also, don't even come close, to having the gray matter that we have, okay? But they're able to take in that data and use it to survive and thrive within their, let's call it their society, their world, right? And so, it's just an interesting thing to contemplate, all right? This is all leading somewhere. So anyway, some reason along the way, a lot of people like to say, this is where this, people get into this Anunnaki thing and the Sumerians and that they altered our DNA and this, that, the other, blah, blah, blah. Look, I know you don't want to hear this, but a lot of that Sitchin stuff, and I have some of Sitchin's books, and I would have been involved in a group, Earth Changes, when Yahoo used to have Yahoo groups and stuff like that over 20 some years ago, like before you were even on the internet probably. And, exploring all that sort of stuff. But it's pretty much come out through, when Sitchin was writing his books and was doing the translations, and no one takes away from the fact that the man was able to translate. He was one of the few guys who was translating that Sumerian type of text, writing, I don't know, cuneiform, whatever the heck it was. And so there weren't people arguing with it, but over the past 20 some plus years, many higher institutes of learning, people have studied this stuff, and museums and curators at museums and people who work on this have found that, much of his stuff, including even the word Anunnaki, doesn't really mean what they think so forget about that. No, I don't believe anymore that, the Sitchin story, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. It's
really funny. Really funny.
Sorry. They laugh at everything, right?
Okay.
And she laughs when I push a button. But so put that aside. If you want to believe that stuff, that's okay. If you want to, believe the ancient alien theory, okay? If you want to believe the, chariots of the gods type of idea, but these guys have been called into question, over the past 50 years, let's say 40 years ago. I think Chariots of Gods is almost like 40 to 50 years old, that book. But it doesn't really matter to me. It's like I often say about, I'm not into your beliefs, ideologies, or things that, that's not what I'm here to talk about. We're just talking about things, the topic of the day and certain phenomenon or UFOs as in today. So I don't really care about that. So if you believe that, if you want to believe Sitchin, if you want to believe the Anunnaki messed with people to mine gold or to get gold to put on their atmosphere to do this, that, the other, and what used to be called Planet X, and then they say Planet 9, and in one of his books was Planet 12. It's like, whatever. Okay? I don't care. And I don't look down at you because you do. Like I say, I've got a couple of the books up in my library upstairs. All right? It's interesting stuff, Anyway. And, some of the images are fascinating, But all that said, okay, so it's clearly our DNA, along the way. And I'm not one of these people that just buys into Darwinism, right? Right? The theory of evolution. Just like I don't buy into the, Einstein's theory of relativity and, the Big Bang theory. Okay? I accept all these things as theories. And like you should. Everything is up for question. So, but more specifically, back to the human body and dealing with the microscopic. And when I was talking about trillions of cells and like the mitochondria, which are actually little motors. But then you have even other microscopic things inside the human body that are constantly duplicating like threads of DNA, chromosomes, things like these little machines that are doing all this stuff, right? Constantly, right? And like there's trillions of operations. And that, over so many years, we renew ourselves, which is weird, right? You know about that. Like, I'm not the same person. Like, this entire body has been kind of cloned, from what it was 10 or 20 years ago. Now, weird, but I'm still the same me, but technically I'm not, right? Which is kind of supports my book Codex and this hard problem of consciousness, right? So you got the bioelectric brain, but then you've got the mind, consciousness, soul consciousness, whatever you want to call it, okay? Which is probably the thing that ties it together, in one regard. But what I'm saying is that we've evolved, but don't think of it in terms of the evolutionary theory or necessarily. But if you want to, you can. But that we've evolved with our senses and the way we navigate through this world in order so that the way our society has been set up. Now, whether or not that's been directed or not by individuals, extraterrestrials, or just people downright, people with bad intentions, evil people, right? The so-called ruling elite, right? Whatever, you could get into David Icke type of stuff, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, right? And some of that stuff, he puts on these 12-hour presentations. There's dot connectors type of thing. And some of that stuff can be very, very, very compelling, and it's interesting, but I'm not going to get into that. It's worthy of mention. So however you see the tapestry I'm laying out for you, all right? I just need to, we need to look at the big picture in order to get down to the super small, all right? So what if, just as we looked at the macro universe that almost looks like the synapses of our brain and these little dots that what appear to be dots are actually clusters of galaxies. Okay, so that the size, the scale of this universe, this incomprehensible, which is the unknowable, right? And we have to accept in our lifetime, will remain the unknowable. Unfortunately, it's unknowable. It's mind-boggling, but it's unknowable. But now, and then let's go to the microscopic. And as I said, there are all these little tiny machine-like things that are like zipping through and copying, strands of this, that, the other, DNA, and, and this, you got chromosomes and you got little machines inside cells and all this kind of weird stuff going on. And it's all, just like your brain is this bioelectric, supercomputer, the whole structure of your, androidish body, which I call it, there's all this activity going on. That's why I say, like, the sun, it's not just vitamin D, man. It's activating like 500 different things or something like that. I think I've heard one biologist talk about. So what if, looking at these UFOs, you're saying like, well, when are you going to talk about UFOs? Well, what if these UFOs, what if the macro micro, like I always say, we live in this macro micro, universe. And that when you think of certain densities, dimensions, right? I don't believe in space-time, by the way. I don't believe space and time should be placed together. People who watch this show know that. I think they're separate, okay? Because I don't buy the idea of gravity being like a bowling ball on a mattress, because that's no explanation for the bulge down below. That just explains why things would, circulate through the top of it. But if they were underneath, if this thing's pushing out the fabric of space-time, right, then they would just fall down. Anything underneath isn't going to be drawn. Unless you would have a fourth dimension so that ball isn't, and you grasp what I'm trying to say, is that isn't in an indent into some sort of space-time matrix causing gravity, but in other words, it's a fourth dimension so that that ball is an indent, somehow indenting both sides, all sides. You see? You can get your hand or your brain, or wrap your brain around that, which means there's a possibility. So that's my hypothesis. And time, so then therefore time is like really is relative, but the idea is that I think you can travel through time, right? And I don't think it has anything to do with the speed of light. In fact, I'm not even sure there is such a thing as the speed of light. I think it's something that's it's measured. It changes, right? And our lifespans are so short that we currently put a speed of light, speed on light, but that we have no concept of in this macro micro universe that the way we understand it. Okay. So what if, and this is the UFO thing, what if these things we're looking at, UFOs, are like these little macro machines that are inside the cells, and they're coming in and they're doing their little adjustments and job, right? Functions. Like, think about that. Like, there's not like somebody in that craft. They're not even craft. And like some people would like to say, like I say, but these aren't like plasma discharges or something weird like that, because, ball lightning or, a lot of explanations that, people like to give. No, in this instance, because it's a firsthand instance, I've, multiple photos, and I've discussed with, this. No, these things actually were behaving in a some sort of intelligent way, but that's not to say that the mitochondria and that the way our duplication of DNA and mitosis and all these other things aren't also behaving in an intelligent way, purposeful, right? There's a purpose behind it, and they function. And that, so what if these things are part of the makeup of the universe at a macro level, just like at a micro level, there's all these sorts of things. And there may be more of these things, some of these things we see and perceive, and other things we can't. It's just a thing. like I say, our perceptions. That's why I brought up the idea of the eagle eye and the, the mouse nose or the insect nose and the small dog's ear or even the mouse ear, for example. Any kind of sensitivity, the navigation of, certain insects and birds and all that stuff. And you could talk about magnetite, which means that probably one of the problems we're having with migratory patterns, apart from windmills killing millions of birds and steering them away from traditional migratory areas, is that with the Earth's magnetic field, the south and geomagnetic South Pole, the magnetic, not geographic, the magnetic South Pole and North Pole having moved, then that basically throws off the compass. In fact, GPS has had to make an adjustment, because of these movements and earth change, all sorts of earth changes. So it's a really crazy world out there, in science, so to speak. And this whole ufology thing, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, is interesting. Now, that's not to say that, there couldn't be time travelers, there couldn't be aliens, extraterrestrials, or things like that. I like I said, the whole concept of science is to question all of these things. And however far out, the explanation is, or the direction you take it in, I mean, you explore it. When you're trying to solve a problem, you look at everything, right? And eventually, and rule out everything until you get down to the basic. My leg was like getting a Charlie horse because of the way I'm sitting on this chair. Because I certainly have enough potassium or whatever the heck it is in my body, because you should see the salads I eat. I definitely get everything you need. I'm not vitamin deficient in any way, shape, or form. But anyway, I'm still being, like you, being exposed to so many different things that have the potential for mutating and causing problems with us on a cellular level, or, this microscopic level. Just as we have all these existential threats, such as comets and asteroids, to our planet as we, zip through space, dragged by the sun. The sun's like a comet dragging our solar system through space at unbelievable, unconceivable speeds. And that it's a shooting gallery out there, right? And if we didn't have the gas giants and a lot of luck, we'd probably be hit a lot more, and have a lot more extinction events than we've had. And which is one of those other things that comes into play when you talk about where's all the other life and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's hard. It's a pretty crazy universe. Sorry about that. It's like my leg, a certain position. It just wants to cramp up. I have to get a new chair if I'm going to continue doing these shows. I have to. Keep saying that, but I haven't done it. Can't afford it. I've been dealing with too many issues between the cat, the rodent. The coal trucks are starting to come up. And for those of you who might have tuned in for this UFO show, this is one of many corridors in which these coal trucks go to feed two coal-fired electric plants. And what I tell you is that people in many areas like this and in many states, if you drive an electric car, it's basically that battery's being charged by coal. People don't like to hear that. Right? Most of our electricity comes from natural gas, by the way, too. So I have no idea why people are talking about 2030 as if they're going to get rid of this stuff, or why they're closing pipelines and stuff. But that's another story. It's a live show. Sorry for bringing out the classic white handkerchief, but this is unedited, live, and, hey, what can I do?
Hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
Well, I just, gave my take on, one of the possible ideas of what some of these aerial phenomenon could be. But then there are many other possibilities, and they literally could be, the universe can be functioning as, in other words, it just can be, people have talked about that before. It's like the classic thing in Animal House, where the Donald Sutherland professor character is getting the two students stoned, and he's like, well, the universe could maybe exist right here on my finger, or something weird like that, one of those weird things. And the other guy's like, whoa, wow. But these questions, we have no answers for that stuff. We don't understand. And that's why it's interesting, this macro micro concept. And there are similarities, but then there are vast differences too in the study of the macro and the micro. So I don't know. I haven't made up my mind. I'm just throwing this stuff out. I heard some guy talking about it, and it was interesting. He wasn't talking about the way I did, but there was a line he said. There was like he was going in a direction, and it kind of like got my brain thinking, and subsequently that's this show. But say you were in that plane, all right, where these photos were taken, and you saw these things outside your window that clearly, all right? And believe me, you know what it's like when you take a picture. The object always seems further away, right? I mean, unless you have a certain kind of lens, right? But, the average person with a smartphone, and I know the person who took this doesn't have the latest, and greatest type of thing. So, these things were huge, and, and they were tracking the plane, and then they were in formation, and then they veered off, and stuff. It's not like they just vanished, or it was ball lightning, and it was or some kind of plasma thing, like I said earlier. What'd you do if you see something like that? I mean, you look up in the sky and you think you see UFOs all the time because, well, we have so many satellites and so much space junk up there that there's stuff floating around, right? And then there's constantly little miniature meteorites just burning up in the atmosphere and stuff like that. So, one of the things that bothers me, and what I like about this image and having firsthand knowledge, knowing the person that took it, and is that it's interesting. I could wrap my head around it and understand it in a sense, But what bothers me about other UFO sightings is that when you see these guys, and there's plenty of people on YouTube that have these UFO things, they show this stuff, and I could submit these things if I wanted to, but I'm not. But it's amazing to me that they don't really have, they're always blurry and, and in the distance, right? And you would think in the age of the smartphone, right? You got all this stuff coming out of, war zones and different places where there's so many people have phones, and they have good phones with really good cameras on them. that why are these things always blurry, you know? Even the Navy pictures that were released, you know, weren't the greatest, you know. You know, it's like, and I think I have, let me just see here. You know, yeah. Let me bring that up. So, like, you know, you have these Navy pictures, and they've been acknowledged by the Pentagon, right? But, you know, and the guys say, oh, yeah. And, you know, and I've heard, you know, people talk about saying that they have clearer pictures than this. But, you know, well, how come you haven't released those? You know? So it's I understand why they call it aerial phenomenon, but even though they were chasing and tracking these things, it's still, you know, where is the, you know, the like Mulder image, you know, right? That's the question. Or is, you know, all of this stuff just time travel, right? Something weird like that. Let's look at the Mulder poster, because I'm sure this here it is. I have this right behind me, but you know, this is a classic UFO, right? But you really don't see these, and the one anytime there is one like this, it's always like totally disproved. Yeah, I've got a copy of this right behind me. Mulder. UFO. It's right back here. In fact, if you look, you can see believe almost. You see it behind game over up here. Yeah. Got it on the wall. But you don't see those, you know, and you would think that in the past 10, 15 years, you know, in the advent of the smartphone, particularly the past 5 years, I would say, as phone cameras became so, well, they're first of all, they're ubiquitous, but I mean that they're, you know, the quality of them is so, you know, crystal clear and zoomable, right? That when they zoom in, it's just like it's blurry and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know about that. So anyway, that's my UFO exclusive, and just a little idea. You know, what if these things are just things that are like part of the universe, part of the planet or something, the ecosystem, right? And they're just performing tasks, keeping order. I think that's what this guy might have mentioned. In other words, what if these things are like to, you know, function to keep certain things in order? And I don't mean like socio-political or, you know, socioeconomic geopolitics, any of that kind of stuff. Forget that. That's garbage. That's, you know, that's civilization stuff, right? Societies. Western civilization has fallen. I've talked about that all the time. The United States isn't a constitutional republic, never will be. It's former U.S. People hate to hear that kind of stuff, but no, what if these things are just part of, you know, the fabric of, you know, of the ecosystem, this planet or solar system or just the universe in general? What if they just, they're performing some task that's not directed by anyone. They just do what they do. Just like these microscopic things within our body just are constantly functioning, doing these things, and they're not necessarily directed by any higher power. It's their function, right? A thing does a thing, right? And so, in other words, the simplest example would be, it would be like if you have a minor cut on your hand, your blood, and unless you are a hemophiliac or something, your blood is going to clot, and then eventually the wound will heal. And depending on what kind of wound it is, the skin may heal perfectly and you'll never know you had a little cut there, or you may have a scar that remains. But the function, that's just the human body functioning as it functions. It's a function of, our living, of the organism that we are. And so what if UFOs or these unidentified aerial phenomenon are just some kind of thing that functions within this ecosystem that we're a part of, right? Just a thought. So maybe in a sense, they are an interesting thing to research and discover. And I know this flies in the face of, MUFON and, people who have, talk about, the Roswell crash and other things and things that are, alien tech and, and all of that stuff and, alien autopsy and Wright Air Force Base, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and all that other kind of stuff. Believe me, I'm familiar with the whole UFO thing. And like I said, I'm fairly well versed and experienced and well read in that area. So I'm not trying to be a naysayer or disprove anything. Even like I talk about the Sumerian tales and stuff like that. I know there's much more to ancient history, much more truth, I believe, in ancient, what we call history, than modern history. In other words, I'm more likely to believe things that are thousands of years old than I am to believe something coming out of the mouth of somebody on one of the network or cable news networks or one of these YouTube pundits. I call them the YouTube millionaires, or somebody on the Joe Rogan show. You see what I mean? Because there's so much more that goes back, such a depth of knowledge, depth of tales, stories, and things that have been passed down and that actually exist on, various, whether it's a clay tablet, a scroll, right, or on carved into buildings, what have you, that there's way more information, knowledge, and history recorded than modern science, which is only a few hundred years old. So how could you even compare, going back 6,000 or 10,000 years, 12,000, whatever you want to, back to the Younger Dryas. But how do you compare that to, modernity, which is just, which is kind of coming to a close. I think our civilization has reached its peak, and what's really the sad part about it is that, like I always say, is that we somehow got sidetracked, diverted, and I guess we fell for, and whether it was accidental or on purpose, but we kind of fell victim and fell for the trap of consumerism and materialism, extreme materialism. Like I say, I'm not a Luddite. Obviously, I'm a broadcaster. I've been involved in technologies and all this stuff, codes and all sorts of things. But no, we didn't really put our priority on the quality of life of the human being. Really, I mean, apart from people who are studying, there are neurologists and out there, people who are studying the human brain, and the hard problem of consciousness is a real thing. And like I say, I started out my book Codex with that. And if you get that, you'll grasp, some of those ideas. But, what do we do? What do we spend our time doing? And I say we, not necessarily me or you, but I mean, as a whole, Western civilization, which is all I could speak for, even though I've traveled around the world over both oceans and stuff, I still can't speak for foreign cultures. I'm not multilingual in a sense that I understand, languages in remote parts of the world and stuff. So I'm not going to pretend I can speak to those things. But I can speak to, what we are, and we seem to be, or were, Western civilization was the empire of modernity, so to speak. And we seem like so caught up in just bright and shiny objects. There goes the Coltrux. And we've been so obsessed with like entertainment, right? Passing the time. I've talked about even yesterday. I mean, I do it myself. I binge watch a show, right? Who knows? I may end up watching a bunch of Rockford Files. I still like that show. Or Moonlighting. I might get back into watching that, or at least watch maybe the last couple seasons, because that's when it started to get real crazy. But, it was fun. And at this point, whether I do it or don't, it doesn't really matter, because we've already passed this point as a society where, like I try to say, this cult of personality, and people are saying, build back better, save America, great reset, all this kind of stuff. It's like, man, it's far too late. You needed to start that back in the 80s. Our infrastructure's fallen apart, and there's just no way to fix it because it's too vast. You see? That's why, I always talk about, great solar stuff, and I set up that site, which is just a site that, shows you some products and stuff in case the power goes down, so you have some power. Because we are an electric society, we're reliant upon electric appliances. Whether, like in my case, I just want it so I can listen to music and, have some lighting at night, that type of thing, right? I don't really care about if the internet goes, the internet goes. I live alone. I do these things. I've done, obviously, like I said, 600 some of these long form shows and thousands of various webcasts, podcasts, broadcasts prior to that. It's just an endless flow of trucks to feed these power plants, because they know this week it's going to be cold. It's going to be below freezing at night. And see, that's the thing, that one of the absurdities about the current movement, that people are against these, what I call organic fuels, right? They call them fossil fuels, but they're really organic fuels. It's just plant matter. What comes out of half these coal plants is just like water vapor. Really. But, people will disagree with that. But the idea is that you have to heat when it's freezing outside. And it's going to be this entire, after today, for a week, we're going to have nights that are all going to be below 0 Celsius, below 32 Fahrenheit, freezing. And so how are you going to do that? You can't do it with windmills that are falling apart and solar panels. Anyone who's watched one of those DIY type of people that have put solar panels up, I say this all the time, but it bears repeating. They put up 12, then they realize they need 24, and then they end up adding 36. Well, who has that kind of space? Right? Right? And in the north, you know, with the weather, the cold, the snow, people just don't think. We didn't structure our society right. We were diverted by, whether it was just, like I say, accidental, coincidental. We seem to like be sidetracked and wowed by the bright and shiny objects and tech. And the big tech companies, instead of like, realizing they had a responsibility in a sense, they just milked it because they were raking in billions of dollars, like Apple computers worth like $1 trillion or something like that. So instead of them trying to improve the quality of life of humans, and so what, they got a watch that takes your heartbeat or something. No, they didn't create Star Trek. They reproduced Star Trek's med room, Bones's, medical facility, right? Sick bay, No, they didn't. It's the year 2022. Could you imagine if big tech would have put its focus into that? See, I've been in a hospital and I've had to have IVs in my arm and lay in that uncomfortable bed, and just, it's the most miserable experience. And hear people in other parts of the hallway just is screaming in pain and all that kind of stuff. It's so primitive for the year 2022. And, meanwhile, they're worried about change. Hey, we got 3 new colors of our latest iPhone, and our Macs are going to come out, in chartreuse. It's like, man, if you put that effort, that time and effort, right? It's like AI and Google and Alphabet and Go. It's like, if you would put that effort into medicine, improving the quality of life, understanding the human brain, instead of trying transhumanism to create a machine, that you can ask questions to. Like I've often talked about savants and people with photographic memory. We already know that the human brain has these possibilities. Well, why aren't we exploring that? Instead of thinking, oh, we'll have to implant something, or we need to create a machine, quantum computer and AI that'll deal with that. And then there's people, oh my God, we're afraid of AI will take over, and it'll be like, the Terminator. And big ag, the food system, processing food. 40,000 people a week are dying of things like type 2 diabetes, heart-related problems, obesity, right? Kidney things. I mean, this is all stuff, you are what you eat. This is all stuff that's taken in as food. And then suddenly on average, 40,000 people a week are dying. So we're not you see what I mean? We got sidetracked. We have all these capabilities. We have these technological capabilities. But instead, we're binge watching TV shows. We're taking pictures with phones. We're tweeting. We're arguing back on Twitter. Like, what the? Twitter? I mean, this is about the 5th time I've talked about it. But what the heck does Elon Musk want with Twitter? Other than to buy it and shut it down is what I would do. We'd all be better off, I guess. But it doesn't matter. Like I say, it's too late. The electric grid is too vast to upgrade in time, right? Every time, if somebody hits a telephone pole, right, which who use, people don't even know what a telephone is, some people. It's an old school thing. But somebody hits a pole and the power goes out. I just read something yesterday because there's one of these community things I get these emails from, right? Power's been out here since 4 p.m. Is anybody know anything? Because you turn on a radio station, it's all just satellite, automated stuff. So there's nobody comes on. That always annoyed me too. Yeah, don't expect anybody to tell you what happened, But that shouldn't happen, and it happens all the time. And they don't know what to do with it because the grid is so old that they end up having to bring in somebody else from some other place. And when there's a snowstorm or an ice storm and trees knock down something, it's like people brought in from other states, linemen and trucks, to get the power back up in some area. Because we have a reactive, not a proactive system. So the grids, it's, it's the same with bridges. I think there's something like 10,000 bridges that are in like really bad shape by failed inspection or something. But, they react to when it, somebody drives over it or something and they see a visible crack and it starts shaking, and let's just hope that no one, we don't have another one of those bridge collapses like we had, I don't know, a decade or two ago. But, this is the situation. And it's the same with the power. They keep talking about, let's get electric cars. Let's let's put windmills all over the place. I mean, I don't see where I don't think there's any room left for any more. But they don't think about it, the fact that these things have a limited lifespan. I did a show. If you check out the show that has a card, no windmills. It shows the sun rise and it says no windmills. And watch it at least long enough to see all the windmill fails. And listen and hear me out in that show. And so I don't know. So maybe these UFOs are people, other time travelers or extraterrestrials looking and trying to figure out, examining this society, like studying, they're historians in a sense, or curiosity seekers, from advanced civilizations who are looking and going like, wow, look at these crazy, look how this society's gone wacko, right? How a civilization can go so awry, it's ridiculous that we could achieve a higher civilization with technology, but use it for idiotic things. None of which I'm against. Like, I'm not against the concept of entertainment. I've been in the entertainment business. I'm not against movies and television shows. I'm not against computing, obviously. Look, I've got a major setup of computing. I designed hundreds of websites to write code and stuff. I love tech. I've been involved in radio, advertising, all these things. I'm not going to go through that again. But the idea is that the companies, the trillion-dollar companies, the multi-hundreds of billions of dollar companies, aren't concerned with the quality of life. Instead, look at right now, we got war-profiteers. Instead of a government, which is a corporatocracy, it's just a collection of all these for-profit companies, right? Like I always say, it's hypocrisy for profit. It's what is what's going on in Washington, D.C. and the media. And of course, the true marionettes are the media and politicians. And if you watch it, you're a puppet of a puppet. But yeah, all the, a few people could get on the phone and end that war overseas, like, in one day. They don't want to. It's worth hundreds of billions of dollars in weapon sales. These companies, that's what their business is. Weapons. They're weapons manufacturers. So they're war profiteers. And don't you find it kind of like odd? I mean, I don't know, that literally within a few months after we get out of Afghanistan, another war breaks out. Doesn't strike you as that strange? But that's just politics. And then there's people, that are into this idea of, like, they waste all their money on the cult of personality and individuals. And then this banter back and forth on places like Twitter, which is just, half the time you're arguing with a bot, a very sophisticated GPT-3 AI bot. Like I said, that if you get my book Codex, they can put together a paragraph, a tweet, better than most functionally illiterate humans, right? And that's not my term. That's the term from the Department of Education, something I read on the Department of Education. People get out of high school and they can't read, right? How's that possible? You should be able to read in like 6th grade. I think people only need to go to school for about 6 years. I think it's so wasted. And after that 6 years, that, then those who want to choose a specific profession, such as become an architect, a doctor, or some kind of engineer, or a specialist in some way, shape, or form, plumber, electrician, or any kind of tradesperson, they're all in the same. I put them all on an equal level. Somebody who, an electrician is just, to me, is on the same level as a surgeon, right? It's funny how we look at trades different, but being a doctor or a surgeon is just a trade, it's a trade. You've learned a skill, right? Some are good and some are bad. There's some surgeons out there that people tell you. I had cancer surgery. And when I told somebody that it is a company, the doctors I was going to, they said, oh man, there's like such and such. But apparently the doctor who was the blundering surgeon had been, left that firm, so to speak. And they brought in some Johns Hopkins guy who was like at the, top of his field, he's one of the best. So, yeah, but it's a trade, you either excel at it, you enjoy it, you are into it, you keep up on the latest blah, blah, blah. But anyway, yeah, so who knows? Maybe these UFOs are just people looking at us and saying, my God, here's an example of a civilization just gone bad. People that just don't get it. And what are we? And what are we? Those of us who see the absurdity of this whole thing, right? The ones that look at this stuff, and say, this is insane. Or even worse.
This is a nightmare. It must be a nightmare.
We're just trapped, in this society, and tormented by the fact that we see the absurdity of it all. And what a waste. And as we age, like me, you just look at it and say, man, imagine what we could have been. When I think back when I was reading books, when I was in school and stuff, and my dreams of what I envisioned the 21st century to be, I never expected it to be like this. Wars, media lying to you, media trying to just sell soap, basically sell commercials, right? Trying to pit people against each other, divisiveness. That's why I have the Be Nice t-shirt, which you really ought to check out and get. It's really a nice thing, and I'm going to show you that before I close out the show. Let me just find this. Just take me a second. I don't like to do this. I don't like to waste your time on these shows, but this is important to me. Product specs. Think about wearing something like that, because that flies in the face of these people on the media and YouTube and Twitter and stuff. Because they're all just like arguing this, that, the other, team red, team blue, some big sports game to them, whatever. But it's like, hey, just be nice. Wear that shirt. It's a statement, right? It's not political. And maybe it'll wake somebody up. Think about it. Anyway, just stuff I do. Like I said, I'm not monetized. I create these things because I'm just trying to help you out.
Good morning.
So, you can visit my site, TonyCaravanLive.com or ROCKFLUX.com. It's the same site. It's a site with links to the things I talk about. My latest 2 books, Then What and Codex. You can get them on Amazon. I advise you to get the print versions because they were designed for print. And I believe they're still 15 to 20% off on all the clothing. So that Be Nice shirt you saw, or this Game Over hoodie, or You Don't Know What You Don't Know, or ROCKFLUX, any of that stuff. I think some of these things, they cost less than $20. So imagine 20% off. And at Great Solar Stuff, I have things, it's just links to products that I've tested. And they're mostly power backup things. And everything there I've used and have. So I put my name behind it. And listen to my beat poetry. I've got 50 songs out there, 10 books. Anyway, take care. I hope you enjoyed the show. I had fun doing it. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.